Do you actually think China's claim to the whole sea is valid, or are you doing a joke / Jen? No, I don't think China's claim to the entire sea is valid. I think it's understandable to want to make sure that your immediate backyard is not turning into a missile base, one micro island at a time, especially when another island nation up there is literally arming itself at a rapid. Now that Donald Trump cut it, this is the last anti-China video he will make. Many people are saying, or maybe this video is not even anti-China. Why China will never surrender the South China Sea. I love the title of this because it's like, why China will never surrender the South China Sea. You know? Anyway.
Look at this map of the most disputed water in the world. It's a sea that is claimed in part by 7 countries.
Tensions are rising in one of the most hotly contested regions on the planet, the South China Sea.
Including one that no one likes to talk about. This sea is peppered with tiny islands, most of which look like this. Small rocks and sunken reefs. But even still, the countries here fight over—
No! No! Oh, God, I should have given a trigger warning. No. No. I'm so sorry, chat. I can't believe I showed you guys the Chinese Coast Guard actually spraying Filipino boats with water hoses. I'm so sorry. As you guys know, this is a spectacularly egregious. Boats hate being hit with water. And also, not only that, but it's significantly worse than anything America did in Gaza in collaboration with Israel. Okay, I didn't realize he was going to show that. I didn't realize he was going to come in hot with that. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh, I didn't realize.
Small
okay.
rocks and sunken reefs. But even still,
oh, no, I'm shaking. I'm shaking. What's next? Is there footage of the Indian and the Chinese border patrol hitting each other with stakes? Ah! Even the mere thought of it, even the mere thought of such unimaginable violence and display makes me think we have to put an end to the Chinese regime right now. I don't know why I'm doing this. USA cut my funding too. You know what I'm saying? I'm just giving them at this point.
The countries here fight over these little rocks. They build bases on them. They create new islands where there were none.
Ah!
And today I want to show you why. Specifically why China claims all of this ocean as theirs, basically the entire South China Sea. I want to show you what China hopes to gain from this claim, both resources and strategic territory. But perhaps more importantly, I want to show you the story that China tells its people and the world about this water.
Chinese construction crews have been dumping massive amounts of white sand in 7 spots in the South China Sea.
So this is the backstory of the South China Sea, and it's part 1 of a 2-part series. The first piece is this one that you're watching right now, and the second one is the modern conflict of the South China Sea that is currently heating up. That video is live right now on our second channel, Search Party.
Taiwan also has the same exact claims to the sea, but no one mentions that, surprisingly. I mean, come on.
So to understand how we got here, you have to rewind to look at maps from hundreds of years ago.
Oh, he loves that.
Like this one.
He loves that. That's his favorite. Oh, he loves that shit. Let's get back. Let's look at some maps, baby.
I mean, there's something about seeing it on paper that just never gets old for me. So this map was commissioned by a wealthy Chinese merchant in around the early 1600s, maybe earlier according to some experts. It's the South China Sea, the map we've been looking at so far in this video, and it's mapped in surprisingly accurate detail.
It's an absolutely fascinating map because it does show in great deal trading routes from the eastern Chinese coast.
Okay, I'm not even joking. What are those guys gonna do now? Like, half of the people that Johnny Harris goes to for these videos, like half of the experts, unironically are funded by USAID. Like, this isn't a fucking, like, Donald Trump style, like, they're funding homosexual Marxism in Guatemala type shit. Like they literally, that is what USA does. Okay. Like if you were to actually look at like what USA does, it's funding those guys. Okay. Maybe not John Old Harris, but like a lot of the people that work at these think tanks or like Friends of Democracy and Freedom Foundation in in Vietnam, or Friends of Democracy and Freedom Foundation in China. So like these guys are oftentimes academics. They work directly. In those think tanks and whatnot, and those think tanks pay them. So what do they do? Like, what are they going to do now that USAID funding is cut? There is a lot of good that the USAID does as well. Make no mistake. I'm not saying that it's just all this, but this is a very direct part of the USAID funding. So I guess they're just all going to go on Johnny Harris's YouTube channel. I don't know.
All the way down through Southeast Asia.
Bill Hayton is a journalist and academic who has studied the South China Sea. He's been walking me through documents and maps that piece together the story of how China got this U-shaped line. At the time, China was a big, powerful civilization. They were a seafaring culture. They used the ocean for trade, and this map is kind of proof of that. You can see all these trade routes, these lines here that go off into Southeast Asia, Indonesia, and off to the Indian Ocean. And importantly, this map shows a bunch of these islands here in the South China Sea. These are very important island groups, and soon you will understand why it is so important that in this map from the 1600s, a Chinese merchant is mapping these islands. I'm gonna put this back now.
It's so shocking to me that a Chinese merchant was mapping out the islands in the South China Sea.
So Chinese merchants and explorers...
I mean, he does this because this is just the style guide thing, okay? It is kind of how he operates. Like, he'll just tell you just a very understandable, very normal fact, but do it with like a dramatic reading where he's like, yeah, this map actually showed islands in the South China Sea.
Explorers knew about these islands. No one lived on them, but they would stop over when the weather got bad. They would fish around them. Archaeologists have found Chinese pottery, bowls, and coins on these islands. But back then, the Chinese Empire didn't care about claiming these islands. There was no sense that they would have any value. They were just some rocks in the middle of the ocean.
This map is good evidence of trading patterns. We have evidence of trading, but we don't have evidence of ownership or occupation because really nobody cared about such things.
That is until the French arrived to Southeast Asia. You didn't think I was going to make it this far without talking about Europeans claiming land, right? Setting the stage for modern conflicts.
Its navy starts to colonize what
That's why he's my goat, because that's in the past. So if it's in the past, it's bad. If the same thing happens now, though, it's very good. Please make no mistake.
Indochina, what's now Vietnam. And that, of course, brings them into direct conflict with China.
So it's the 1930s, and France has claimed ownership over these islands, which angers China and Japan. These islands, this water, it started to become more strategic to these growing empires.
So then a lot of the strategic thinkers in Britain and Paris and the US are thinking about who's going to control these little islands in the South China Sea and what does it mean?
Especially Japan, who had followed the example.
It's wild. The audacity, brother. The audacity of fucking white people. It is so crazy. Anyway, let's continue.
Of European empires and started growing an empire of their own. By the late 1930s, Japan starts rapidly taking over this whole region, including a lot of these islands in the South China Sea.
Japanese have started surveys and thinking, well, we can use this for a seaplane harbor or a submarine dock or something like that during the Second World War.
I will admit, the one positive aspect of French imperialism in the region is that it created one of the greatest sandwiches of all time, the banh mi. That's it, though. Like, no positives outside of that, but the banh mi is excellent. Excellent stuff. Sometimes there's the good and the bad. You know what I mean? It is an incredible sandwich. It is so fucking good. Holy shit.
War. I mean, the South China Sea basically becomes, for the first time in history, one power controls almost the whole of the coast of the South China Sea.
Eventually, the US would enter World War II and beat back Japan, forcing them to give up control of all of this territory that it had conquered during the war, including all of these islands in the South China Sea. World War II.
Is this position going to be Chinese imperialism good if you have a claim in the past? Are you insane? You think, first of all, like, you think Johnny Harris is going to say it's good that China wants to control its immediate coastline and the waterways that open up Chinese commerce to global trade? Chinese imperialism. America not doing imperialism. It's only Chinese imperialism when you want to ensure that you can still maintain global trade without any military action. Chat, why does Hasan dislike Johnny so much? I thought he used to like him, sorta. There's a couple of videos that actually made my brain explode that I watched, but I do generally like Johnny Harris. I joke, I kid, I say he's CIA, but there are a couple videos that have genuinely exploded my brain. I think the one I can think of, for every like 2 decent videos, he has like a third one that is just so fucking bad where you're like, come on, dude. The Joe Rogan one.
Clear that,
and the MLK one come to mind immediately. Those are the two that it was. There was an Elon one too, I think.
all of these rocky islands were suddenly important. They were strategic.
The Japan video was annoying too, but it wasn't like that bad, where he was like talking about the Japanese self-defense forces, which is an unconstitutional unit that shouldn't even exist, that he trained with and how it took a party on.
Locations at a very important crossroads in the world. It also made it clear that if your country doesn't claim them, someone else will. So we have a bit of a scramble for all these islands. China, of course, thinks that most of this is theirs. Remember the maps and the pottery? Vietnam, who's going through an independence movement, is split in two, but the South comes out and says a lot of these islands are close to Vietnam. Not to mention their former colonizer France formally claimed them, so they should belong to Vietnam. The Philippines is busy establishing its newly independent country, so it doesn't claim any of these islands at first. But, strangely, one Filipino businessman goes out to a cluster of 53 islands and claims that he discovered them. And he declares his own country.
Pinoy Gang.
Called, wait for it, the Free Territory of Freedom Land.
Pinoy Gang.
That name.
Filipinos, a seafaring group of individuals, you know, it's just Pinoy Gang, give it to them.
Now, this Filipino businessman only occupied these islands for like 90 days, but his claim technically lasted like a couple decades before eventually the Filipino government forced him to give it up. They actually tried to use his
that's fucked up. That's fucked up. That's actually messed up.
Claim to say that these islands belong to the Philippines. I mean, you can see how difficult this is getting. There are hundreds of little tiny islands scattered throughout the South China Sea. They weren't that important for many centuries, and
if China's taken over the immediate coastline of another country, then yes, it's imperialism, bro. China wasn't some uncontacted native tribe in the 1600s. They were the richest civilization on earth. Isn't that far-fetched for their actions to be characterized as imperialism? I think what they are interested in doing is what changes the dynamic. Like if they are trying to protect their coastline and ensure that they have like free commerce, that's one thing. Okay. Delayed autistic guppy, back at it again. Also, I'm Turkish, so this is a sore subject for me. Okay. Just make no mistake. You know, I know a lot about unoccupied pieces of fucking land that stick out over waterways that create historic territorial claims amongst different, maybe former imperial powers. Okay? I'm not even talking about Cyprus. I'm talking straight up, literally like a little baby piece of land that sticks out from the water. Okay?
suddenly they became very important all at once. But now let me show you the map that will change everything. This is perhaps the biggest moment in the history of the South China Sea. Hold on a second. Wait, actually, before I do, I should pause and thank the sponsor of today's video because it actually has a lot to do
China
with
wants to
my
control
goal for this
Taiwanese
video,
airspace.
which is
Meanwhile,
I'm trying
Taiwanese
to give an
airspace.
alternative view of the South China Sea, something different than what you normally see. Here in the United States, I mostly consume Western media. which makes getting a truly global perspective difficult. And that's because this is a really polarizing issue.
We're
Very
doing ethical
which is why
reacts.
I have been a longtime subscriber of Ground News. I am a
Okay.
on the channel, which is promote transparency, fairness, critical thinking, curiosity, and awareness of our biases. Thank you, Ground News, for existing and for sponsoring today's video. Check out that link if you're interested.
That is ADIZ, not airspace. You're spreading misinformation about that. Spratly Islands are not China's immediate. You think Spratly Islands are China's immediate coast? Spratly Islands are not China's immediate coastline. That is ADIZ, not airspace. You're spreading misinformation about that. Hawaii isn't in US. Okay, Guam. What do you mean, Hawaii? Air Defense Identification Zone, ADIZ.
And now I'm gonna go get that map. So here it is. Let's go back up to China really quick. And there's actually not just...
Do you actually think China's claim to the whole sea is valid, or are you doing a joke / Jen? No, I don't think China's claim to the entire sea is valid. I think it's understandable to want to make sure that your fucking immediate backyard is not turning into a fucking missile base, one micro island at a fucking time, especially when another island nation up there is literally arming itself at a rapid clip. Okay? Like, come on, guys. What the fuck are we talking about? Why do we act like a country has no interest in self-preservation? Like, this is ridiculous. It is a completely fucking ridiculous notion. Everyone in the USA wants to do great power politics until it's another great power. Exactly. So you also going to defend attacking the Panama Canal? Brother, Dude, the problem with the Panama Canal isn't that Trump's claims are correct. Okay? Do you think China has actually militarily taken over the Panama Canal? And that's why Trump is actually correct in saying he's going to own it now? What are you talking about?
One China. There are two. And look at this moment. It's right after World War II, so it's like the late 1940s. There's the nationalist government, the Republic of China is what it's called. They're like the main government of China. But then there is a communist revolution.
Ask all the Taiwan Sims in the chat whether they support Taiwan's claims to the Spratly Islands. It's not just those islands as well. It's also the entirety of mainland China, which is, I mean, I don't even think that that's productive to discuss, to be fair.
A bunch of revolutionaries that are fighting to overthrow the government. It's a civil war. But even during this civil war, the Republic of China, the nationalists, aren't going to let all these other countries take over these islands. So they send their navy out to some of the largest islands in these groups. And these ships show up to these islands basically saying, we're going to claim these for China. Oh, and little side note here, guess where they got these naval ships? From the United States of America, who gave them to the Republic of China to support them because they were fighting communists. But they're using these ships to claim islands in the South China Sea.
And so the 12th of December 1946 is the first time that any...
Dude, what the fuck are you talking about? The U.S. island bases are ancient and have existed for millennia, and China is a new country which has only existed for a couple centuries at best. The U.S. has every right to arm those islands. Yeah, what are you talking about? The U.S. has laid historic claims to all of the islands, including Taiwan, okay? This is an emancipatory struggle. You don't understand, okay? America definitely has really good interests, okay? You don't understand. America is a naturally occurring phenomenon around the planet, and this joint security cooperative agreements that America has put forward is not simply like you with your simple mind might think like the Korean War. Excuse me, there were fucking communists. They have to be killed. Okay, how else are you going to set up a bulwark against Chi-Coms? How else are you going to set up a bulwark against the Soviet Empire? Okay, that's the real empire. Not the 88,000 troops that are permanently stationed in South Korea. Hello. Sometimes you got to split a country in two, okay? And then maintain a permanent military presence there, because otherwise, ooh, scary.
The Chinese official goes to a Spratly Island and sticks a flag in it. Nobody ever lives there permanently, but people go and sort of stick a flag, and then the other guy comes and pulls the flag out, sticks their own flag in.
And then
Doesn't Taiwan want independence, though? Yes. I think that it is unfair to say that Taiwan wants to unify with China at this stage. They don't. They want independence, but what they want more than independence is to not fuck up the current bag that they have. Okay? That's it. They just don't want to rock the boat. But if don't rock the boat is not considered as an option, then yes, they want independence more than they want unification. Okay? But the overwhelming majority want the current situation to not fall apart. Okay? And no, you're the people that say like, no, Taiwan has historic claims to the entirety of mainland China, like that stuff is bullshit. That doesn't exist anymore. Even the KMT is the Unify Party now. Okay? Things have changed. Taiwan wants independence by maintaining the status quo. A whopping 83% shows overwhelmingly what Taiwan that's what Taiwanese want. That is correct. U.S. anti-China rhetoric is cooking Australia because our policies have copied the rhetoric, even though China is our main trade partner. So fucking stupid. Yeah. Well, also, you have to remember, it's going to work in a fucking penal colony like Australia, a settler colonial enterprise comprised of, you know, white bandits who also did their own indigenous genocide. So obviously, yeah, if there's another country where the, you know, the Orientalist narratives are going to be very successful, it's going to be Australia.
They released this map. Take a look. This is the official map where they claim what they say is their water in the South China Sea. It's made up of these dashes, 11 dashes to be precise, drawn around the periphery of the entire South China Sea. This map is basically saying, hey guys, this water has always been ours and remains ours. Stay back. Now that Japan is defeated, we are going to formally assert that this water is ours, as it always has.
Dude, one of the fucking... I don't even want to get into it now, but people are going to get very mad at me for saying this because of how this reflects like on current Taiwan-China policy. But if it wasn't for the Korean War, okay, this would not be a point of contention. That's it. And that is historical fact. If not for the Korean War, this would not even be a conversation. That's it. Why? How did the KMT arrive at Formosa? Mao was entertaining the notion of finishing the job, and then the Korean War happened. Now he's calling it Formosa. I mean, what do you mean? Like, what do you want me to say? That was the name at the time. What the fuck? Yeah, China was prepped to invade Taiwan, but the Korean War made them divert all their attention to North Korea. Why is it contentious in today's context? Because people think of Taiwan as it is now, which is generations removed from what I'm talking about. And then they think like, oh, well, these are a bunch of like brave good guys that are very Western facing and just brave good guys that were going to be unfairly maligned by the scary bad guy, Mao Zedong, you know? But like the dynamic was very different back then. They were nationalists. They were fascist. Very, very ruthless and very brutal, as a matter of fact. The people of Taiwan, I suspect, are going to be increasingly open to reunification given how things are going with the U.S., even if the majority don't approve of it today. I don't know. Yeah, we're talking about when they initially got pushed out.
This is the most important map and the most important moment in this history.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a Stalin L as well. It's also crazier to think if Stalin gave Chinese air support, the Koreans would have won the Korean War. Let's not talk about such things, okay? A lot of people talk about how Stalin was a ruthless chauvinist, okay? The red chauvinist, also interested in the spoils of empire. I think sometimes about the many different instances where Stalin took a defensive posture and was too slow, or maybe even genuinely thought, oh, surely the West won't actually do this insane thing. I mean, we were partners. They'll help us. They'll let us lick our wounds after we successfully defeated the Nazis. Surely.
I've always been mesmerized by the sort of ambiguity and ambition of this line. And I don't have a solid theory as to the motives of the people who decided to draw it and what they were after. And again, especially in the context of a divided nationalist government that is being hounded by communist revolutionaries and soon about to lose a war, and yet they make time to draw a map and release it to the world. What's going on here?
So at the end of the Second World War, you still had a country which didn't really, define its boundaries. And so they called upon geography professors.
Would you support U.S. giving Ukraine support against Russia today? No, right? I think you understand the party's logic back in the 50s. Yeah, they were wrong. We understand now with today's eyes that they were wrong. What are you talking about? There were plenty of opportunities to change the tide of battle.
In 1946, specifically with regard to the sea, to try and work out which islands China was going to claim. And they go back to this old
I don't know.
atlas.
It's just, I get it too. I also understand. Nice job empathizing, Hasan. Empathy is my guiding compass picker. You are so way to be empathetic to all the people in the Spratly Islands. All three of them. They are now under Chi-Com control, dude. Hasan. Stalin killed more people than Hitler. Please, just facts. Sorry. In camps, I mean. I've asked ChatGPT. Sorry, guys. Yeah, no, definitely. Stalin was definitely worse than Adolf Hitler. What are we doing? I don't think Churchill was worse than Adolf Hitler. Okay? I don't think America is worse than Adolf Hitler. You can't, that's an insane statement, dude. The logical conclusion of double genocide, which was initially implemented as like Holocaust revisionism, has eventually turned into actually the real genocide is Stalin. And actually, maybe inevitably you arrive at the principled position of perhaps the Nazis were not on the wrong side of World War II. That's the logical conclusion of that, okay?
1936, and they say this is where the line should be.
Okay, back up to China, where there's a civil war happening, and one side is winning, the communists, led by Mao Zedong, and the Republic of China is fleeing, looking for safety. It's their government, their military, and their civilian followers, millions of people, all running away from the communists. And they end up here at this
Yeah, there's the ruthless, brutal commies.
180 kilometers straight.
How did they keep flipping? How did the peasant class keep turning on how did the peasant class keep turning on the nationalists? I wonder. What was that about? They just kept going, oh shit. Well, it seems like land reform is a spectacular deal for us. I mean, I'm a fucking peasant. I don't want to go back to the old ways of doing things. How does it feel to know that John Old Harris pronounces Mao Zedong better than you? Yeah, it's whatever. It's fine.
Where they cross it to this Chinese island.
I can't pronounce it too good because then people will say I'm an asset.
Of Taiwan. They were safe here. The communists couldn't cross this strait because their Navy and Air Force weren't strong enough.
Yeah, they're afraid of the water.
Plus, they figured that the US would come to their defense. So now we still have these two mean to be the real China and who both hate each other.
I just feel like China claimed, I feel like at that point it seems like China decided, you know what I mean? Both Chinas, interesting. Both Chinas, one China backed by America and officially recognized as the real China, but they're over here.
Each other. Okay, back to the South China Sea. What did Mao Zedong do with the South China Sea after he took over mainland China? Well, he adopted the same map that the Republic of China had drawn, this 11-dash line that encompasses the whole sea. So now you have both of these Chinas, China and Taiwan, both claiming the same body of water. And this big claim overlaps with the claims coming in from all these other countries.
I think that normalization is already happening with a lot of these other countries, with the exception of the Philippines, I would say. And that if there was a cooperative security agreement with all of these other countries that removed America from the equation, which is more likely now than ever before, I would say, that they would see no reason to dominate the Paracel Islands or the Spratly Islands or whatever the fuck, okay? That's what I think.
So this is our context. This is how we got here. China feels entitled to all of this water. They draw an 11-dash line. They split into two Chinas who both claim this 11-dash line. And it's like 1950 or something. Now, a few years later, the mainland China, the communists, did remove 2 of these dashes from the 11-dash line. They gave up an island and some water back to North Vietnam as a gesture of friendship to their communist comrades. So now...
Wait a minute. Huh. Why did they do that? I thought they were interested in empire shit. What? That's weird. It almost seems like... Wait, that's curious. That's interesting.
Mainland China has a 9-dash line, and the Republic of China, Taiwan, has an 11-dash line. I mean, this is getting weird.
Huh.
As the 20th century progresses, the scramble continues as countries start backing up their claims with military might, trying to establish a physical presence on the islands that they claim. So Taiwan sends their troops back to Taiping Island, which they still hold today. And things start heating up even more when the global economy starts to come online, and we realize that this water is along critical shipping lanes. It's good water for fishing, and it is strategically placed militarily. And then in the late 1960s, they discover oil in the South China Sea. And once again, the race is on.
So it's a kind of, all of these emerging nation states standing up and standing proud, really.
South Vietnam tries to make good on its claim in the Spratly Islands by sending settlers to claim the islands and working with foreign oil companies to start drilling. China starts drilling too in the Paracels. A lot of Chinese fishermen are also down here, and South Vietnam doesn't like this, so they send their army to kick these fishermen out. China doesn't take kindly to this, and so they then send 6 naval vessels and 2 support jets to fight the South Vietnamese, taking full control of these islands and getting into a clash that kills 70 Vietnamese troops. And once they do this, China decides they don't want to leave. So they start setting up more infrastructure on these islands, having a permanent presence and controlling them completely. Over the years, the islands start filling up with more and more military bases and outposts. It becomes a crowded neighborhood.
It's a good thing that America at this stage was completely and utterly removed from the equation. Like, if you watch this video 15 minutes in, the United States of America has not been mentioned even once, okay? I'm sorry. They did mention it one time. They said America is invested in the defense of the real China in Taiwan. Sorry. They did say 2 things. One, Republic of China got ships from America initially because they were like, oh, these guys are nationalists and good. And then 2, they mentioned that America is defending Taiwan from fake China. What do you mean South Vietnam, ? Taiwan, ? Yeah, those are utterly removed from American interest, okay? Also kind of weird not to talk about Japan either in any part of this story. Like, that also is kind of weird because, like, or Korea. I feel like those events were pretty big. I mean, like, Japan briefly being mentioned is not what I'm talking about. And also, he talked about Japan as, like, ancient Chinese empire shit and not necessarily, like, Japanese. He skipped French colonialism to World War II. I mean, there was a bunch of skips. I have to pee really bad. Hold on.
Where everyone is fighting for a slice of oil or shipping lanes, minerals, or just a strategic military location. Needless to say, this way of doing things is not a great way to solve territorial disputes in the water. Like, whoever shows up first and puts their little pushpin on the map, it's not a way to avoid conflict. Luckily, the law of the sea was just around the corner. So while all these countries were fighting over the South China Sea, the international community was working on solving the problem of how to determine what country gets what water. The world was getting better at finding valuable resources in the deep ocean, and we really needed rules on who owned what.
Communist China takes part in the discussions on the law of the sea as a full member, and so therefore it's kind of if you like, represents something that they agreed to. So in theory, it's bound by the rules of UNCLOS, which say that, you can claim territorial sea of 12 nautical miles. You can then make a resource claim that goes up to 200 nautical miles. But that doesn't really fit with the U-shaped line claim.
And almost every country on Earth agreed to this. They ratified UNCLOS, except for one, the United States of America. Yes, the United States, while they do follow the norms of UNCLOS, have not ratified it, which is kind of a trend with the US. Like, they want to preserve the global order, but they don't want to necessarily agree to all of the laws because they don't like to be constrained.
Unified Vietnam didn't even mention it. Okay, Johnny, I see you. Yeah, it just kind of happened. It's just weird. America kind of does that a lot. America is anarchist, the most anarchist nation state of all. We don't follow Admiral Maritime Law, brother.
Back to the South China Sea, UNCLOS was supposed to create order, create a framework through which all these countries can make their claims and work things out peaceably. But that didn't happen. In fact, the whole 200 nautical mile rule incentivized countries to try to claim these little islands, because if you claim this little island, you get 200 nautical miles off of that island. So countries continue to build things on these islands, especially China, who's built all sorts of military bases and has even resorted to building new islands where there were none, which, like, someday I want to go there and see what that looks like. Like, I've seen it from above in these satellite photos of how they're dredging up all of this sand and putting it on these reefs, but it just never made sense to me how they can build islands.
They're kind of goated with the sauce like that.
China has then sort of said, well, we're not just talking about one island, we're talking about groups of islands. And if they're a group of islands, could we draw a line around the whole group of islands and then claim from there? And everyone else is saying, no, that's not what it says in the text.
China continues to this day to claim the 9-dash line as their official claim to the South China Sea. And by the way, so does Taiwan, though they claim the 11-dash line. We don't hear about that much.
I wonder why.
In 2016, the Philippines sued China in the International Court of Arbitration, saying that China was violating UNCLOS and infringing in the Filipino EEZ with their 9-dash line. China declined to participate in these proceedings, saying that the court had no jurisdiction to rule in what they view as Chinese waters. But the court proceeded and came out with a ruling that said that China's 9-dash line was totally illegal, or lawless in their words.
Yeah, I think it's significant that China,
traditionally seafaring, is just,
isn't just saying,
much love for the Swagapinos,
it's ours, go away, we've got a bigger navy than you. It is also saying what we're doing is legal, but other countries don't accept the legal arguments.
I'm looking at the legal rebuttal from the Chinese government during this tribunal, and it basically tells the story
Swagapino is really hurting my feelings. I'm gonna be honest. America's #1 ally in the region, other than, I guess if you factor out Taiwan and South Korea and Japan, but certainly in that area.
just laid out here in this video. The Chinese activities in the South China Sea date back over 2,000 years.
I wonder if you have any Taiwanese fans. I have Taiwanese relatives, dude. What are you talking about? Taiwanese fans. I have immediate family members.
China was the first country to discover, name, explore, and exploit the resources of the South China Sea islands, and the first to continuously exercise sovereign powers over them. Then they talk about how in the 30s and 40s, foreigners, especially Japan, illegally seized some parts of the South China Sea. There were some wars. And then after World War II, the Chinese government resumed exercising its sovereignty over the South China Sea. And that all of these acts affirm China's territorial sovereignty and relevant maritime rights and interests in the South China Sea. This history is core to their claim.
At the bottom, it's an argument over who owns each individual rock and reef. And China, has a good claim to being the first country to have stuck a flag in certain, rocks or reefs and then maintained a presence there.
Okay, now that we've gone through the history, but if maps, pottery, fishing activity all thousands of years ago is what you need to make a modern day maritime claim, then other countries like Vietnam and even the Philippines would have a similar claim. One thing I've learned is that the time machine game of who got here first is not a useful way to settle border disputes. It's just not. You can always go back further. But even still, China continues to
Love all the Asian people being interviewed here. Yeah, well, that's what happens when you cut US aid funding. Okay? Anti-DEI plus US aid funding. And all you can get is a white British dude who has epigenetic memories of Western imperialism baked into his core. It's a part of his core identity. So, of course, he's going to immediately posture the way that he is.
to assert this 9-dash line, even as it causes major tension with almost all their neighbors.
Racist. Mother Puncher 313.
And this gets to a really important
I'm
aspect
joking.
of this water. It's the reason we started this video showing you all of those old maps, that pottery. China's 9 dashes on a map is not a matter of law, but of national identity. It's a core part of the country's national story, of China being this continuous civilization, uninterrupted for thousands of years. And again, this is Taiwan's story and claim as well.
When Xi Jinping talks about, the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, there's definitely a territorial component to that. And the U-shaped line is printed in every Chinese passport now. It's very much alive. It's part of the sort of patriotic education campaign. Chinese school kids are taught about the line. They're taught that, China, was humiliated by the foreign powers and that this, was a sign of China becoming a, respected nation state.
This claim and others in the region has contributed to a rising and falling and rising of tension over the years. And right now, that tension is rising. And that is the next part of this story, which continues on our second channel, Search Party, where Sam will take you through the story of what happens next.
Oh God, what happens next? 2-parter. All right, we'll watch it. What's the second part? Why doesn't he link it here? I don't understand.
To tell you why this tension is heating up, why Chinese Coast Guard,
Axe.
why this.
In June 2024,
Oh God, no! Don't start with the boats. Oh no, dude. Oh fuck. I'm scared. I hope they don't show the guy with the axe again.
this ship from the Philippines Navy was rammed by 2 ships from the Chinese Coast Guard. A few minutes later, a standoff ensues. China's Coast Guard is seen brandishing
Top Shi is back. This video is not made to educate an uninformed audience. This video is made to manufacture consent from a misinformed public. Will Mr. Harris sign up for war? We saw his pitiful training with a weak Japanese army before. Americans are so desperate to provoke conflict with China because that's the extent of their foreign policy, military conflict.
axes and knives. It happened at a shallow reef called Second Thomas Shoal, where the Philippines have a few soldiers stationed on a grounded ship. China also claims the reef, and in early 2020, reaching it. When the Philippines made another attempt in June, the Chinese Coast Guard rammed them. This would be a minor incident if it weren't in one of the most contentious places on Earth.
And a storm.
Yeah, there is, from what I understand, there is already an existing security cooperation, which many of the other parties have signed on to, with the exception of the Philippines. Like there is a priority areas of cooperation in ASEAN. Your Pinoy fans hate you. Stop watching this part. I'm sorry to the
brewing
Pinoy
in
gang.
the South China Sea.
Another confrontation has taken place between Chinese and Philippine vessels.
It's the second such event in 2 weeks.
These giant ships are essentially playing chicken. A high seas confrontation that could ignite a war.
6 countries claim parts of the South China Sea, and the competition is getting fierce.
You have fishers.
Yeah, I'm sorry to show you these devastating sights, as opposed to how America and America's security partners, what they do when someone violates what they have decided is like territory that they, or international waters that they must quote unquote protect, like let's say there's a genocide going on, hypothetically. Okay. Let's say the military base that is an extension of American empire in a region far, far away from the United States of America, but a very resource-rich region, is conducting a genocide on its indigenous population. Okay, totally hypothetical. Let's say that at the tip of the Red Sea, there's another country that says, oh, well, we just went through a similar genocide. We just went through a famine. Okay. And I mean, this is all hypothetical. It's just not, this would never happen, right? But let's say there's another country that just went through a manufactured, man-made famine with America's allies, with American weapons, with American missile guidance systems. Let's say that that's happening. And then the other country says, well, we're a sovereign nation. And we think that what's going on in this genocide is horrifying. We are going to stop the trade routes that touch our coastline. Now, let's say this other country is in a very specific part of the Red Sea where they actually can do that. They have the capacity to do that, right? And no, I'm not talking about Djibouti, okay? The world's most important country, okay? Now, in that process, what would America do? What would the United States of America do? I wonder. I'm just thinking, like, would they show up with axes? Would they just like spray water? What would they do? I suspect it would cost $1 billion, give or take. You know.
You have these militia actors, you have multiple nations. There's a lot more variables, and there's a lot more chance that something unintended happens that you cannot de-escalate.
So what's driving up tensions in the South China Sea? What do all these countries want? And what is this conflict really about?
Damn. Donald McDonald Harris's second channel goes hard with the music. Literally the definition of whataboutism. Great job, Superthinker. That's that Rutgers brain hard at work, Lamau. Really? An identical situation where America happens to be thousands of fucking miles away, okay? Doing not one, or supporting and facilitating not one, but two genocides, being compared to the Chinese Coast Guard spraying Filipino boats with water, okay? Doesn't impact the situation? Yes, of course it does. What the fuck are you talking about? I'm saying hegemonic powers behaving in one way is criticized dramatically by the other hegemonic power that is doing an untold amount of fucking violence in a similar situation, in a worse situation, as a matter of fact. And it's always the people that literally defend the other thing on principle while simultaneously saying, look at what China's doing. It's devastating. So no, this is not whataboutism, you dumb fuck. It's a direct comparison. It is a direct comparison that is happening right now. It wasn't a hypothetical situation. Are you stupid enough to think that I was mentioning a hypothetical situation? Holy fuck. Ironically enough, the instance of one and the historical actions that one party that is engaged in, that one country is engaged in, is literally the reason why the other country is like, yeah, we want to maintain some sort of control over this fucking region. That's why I think when Johnny Harris doesn't talk about American actions in that area, it kind of completely deletes an entire part of this conversation. Okay? Yeah, if you don't add America into the equation, the global hegemonic superpower in fucking perpetuity, okay, constantly destabilizing countries in the region, invading them, doing literally genocide, like to a T. Korean War absolutely could be considered a genocide. It's just when America does it, it's not, we just don't say it is, right? Because, again, global hegemonic. Okay? Perhaps that plays a role in another regional power wanting to make sure that their trade routes are secure, while also simultaneously, I'm certain of this, if the other countries around the region were to cooperate, they wouldn't do any of this shit. Also, what we're talking about is really stupid because Donald Trump is accelerating the process regardless, okay? Donald Trump, with his insane actions, are most likely going to cause countries to reconsider the ways in which they've currently dealt with China.
In the South China Sea, the stakes couldn't be...
You cannot say that for sure. If any other country has the power of the U.S., they would rape the planet. Dude, this is a psychotic hypothetical. You understand? a psychotic hypothetical. Like, what are you fucking saying? What are you saying right now? Really reconsider what you're saying. First of all, what has America done to the entire planet? Holy fuck. And secondly, what do you mean? Oh, if other countries had that kind of power, they would just use it in a very different way. They would do it much worse than America. It's so funny to have this conversation right here when we're talking about the United States of America that's dropped not one but 2 nukes on a civilian population in Japan, okay? Invaded this fucking country, bombed the other one into oblivion, okay, where there's still birth defects happening, destabilized virtually all of them, historically also engaged in war with this one too, okay? Like, what are you talking about? And it's fucking like 5,000 miles away too. That's the other side of the story, which is like, ironically, this debate lord just did a whataboutism that they accused you of. The only thing you have, the only assessment that you're making in this situation is that, like, well, those other guys would be worse than America. You have no historical basis for this, okay? And you have no proof or evidence of what. You have no proof or evidence in terms of like how this would work, except that is at the heart of Western chauvinism in general. That is precisely what slave owners said. If we free the slaves, they will come back and enslave us. That is precisely what Israel says about the Palestinians. If we free the Palestinians, they'll come back and do to us what we've done to them. That's what the South Africans said during the time of apartheid. If we abolish the apartheid, then black people will do to us what we've done to them. Okay? I mean, they weren't wrong. Holy fuck, dude. That is such an embarrassingly racist thing to say. Jesus Christ. Yeah. White people got enslaved by black people in the South. This is what billionaires say about the working class people. Yes. Yes. Those who maintain power will always claim that, oh, if the situation was different, if the roles were reversed, we'd be getting fucking destroyed. That's fair. It's just an opinion. But I like the idea that we have the power and could have done worse, but held back. I don't think America could have done worse. Unless you just nuke the entire planet, I guess. Like, what are we holding back on? This is the same old dynamic, especially 60 months of genocide. Very weird thing to say. Have we held it back?
Tens of millions of barrels of oil and gas sit below it. Shipping routes that carry $3.4 trillion in annual trade run through it, and its dwindling fisheries sustain millions of people. The Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, Taiwan, and Vietnam are each claiming rights to waters roughly up to 200 nautical miles off their shores. These exclusive economic zones are prescribed under international law. China has one too, but it's claiming...
Yeah, America really held back in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, really holding it back real hard.
More. It illustrates its claim with this 9-dash line, something its government drew over 70 years ago.
They claim some form of historic rights, but what exactly they're claiming within that line has never been clarified.
I called Harrison Pratat, an expert on the territorial disputes in the South China Sea.
It's part of China's identity now to be a strong nation that does not cede its territory to others.
In fact, in 2023, China added a 10th dash next to Taiwan. But the problem with this line is that China's the only country that recognizes it. In 2016, an international court ruled that it has no legal basis. But that hasn't stopped China from trying to take control of it anyways. It's been occupying rocks and reefs all over the South China Sea, and even building new islands. In the Spratly Islands, 3 other countries have claims. But over the last decade, China piled sand onto reefs to build bases, complete with airstrips, weapons, and harbors for its ships. China uses them to extend its claim and support a huge fleet of vessels to enforce it. In 2014, it placed an oil rig within Vietnam's EEZ and sent dozens of ships there to prevent Vietnam from reaching it. Even as the Vietnamese protested, China didn't back down. In 2021, it ordered more than 200 fishing boats to dock at the unoccupied Whitsun Reef, leading the Philippines to worry that China was preparing to build on it, sparking a standoff that lasted for months until the boats left. China's message, though, was clear.
If it does not occupy, control, and exclusively exploit the South China Sea, then it should have the say over who does.
But today, its neighbors are fighting back.
I, for one, can't imagine a country that was associated building bases against another country's will. I know. That'd be crazy. Totally. That would never happen.
So I've covered the South China Sea before, but this time when I dove in, everything had changed. New players, new locations, and the stakes were higher than ever. Thankfully, I was able to stay organized thanks to Ground News. That's a website and app that gathers
Damn,
stories
is a
from all
4-minute
video
video of...
And I'll take you back to the South China Sea.
So China's essentially been trying to overrule the claims of the other countries in the South China Sea. To that in a slightly different way. I thought it'd be useful to rank them from the least to the most aggressive. Taiwan and Brunei have essentially surrendered. Taiwan doesn't want to risk further conflict with China.
Essentially surrendered. Yeah, dude. Ultimately, the regional actors want to maintain they want to maintain a cooperative agreement with the fucking large power up their ass cheek. Okay. And the way I see it is, if fucking Vietnam can let bygones be bygones, then so should the Filipinos. It's also not surrender. It's you just said it. What? Said what?
While Brunei depends on China for most of its trade, Malaysia is typically quiet too, except for
Vietnam does not let bygones be bygones with China. Oh, yeah, they have every reason not to. That's number one. And number two, no, they've normalized relations with China as well.
Oil and gas, whereas EEZ overlaps with China's 9-dash line. China protests, but Malaysia refuses to stop.
Malaysia tidak berganjak dari tuntutan dan pendirian kita tentang kawasan milik Malaysia, walaupun dibangkitkan oleh negara China.
Vietnam is going even further. It claims a number of reefs and islands and has begun to copy China's tactics. It's built this.
I think a big part of this equation is also the trade partnership agreements that China has with these countries and the development agreements that China has with these countries as well.
Reef into an island base and greatly extended the size of two others. In fact, since 2022, Vietnam's reclaimed more land than China has. But for some reason, China hasn't stopped it.
Maybe they're putting a premium on those kind of party-to-party communist party.
Look at that. Like the number one OGL of all time for China. Greatest Chinese L. Big time. Dude, I'm not aware why Vietnam hates China. Please explain. China invaded Vietnam. Also for the worst reasons too. To basically defend the Khmer Rouge. We don't talk about that. That's not a good period of Chinese history, okay? Major L.
Party ties in Vietnam and that relationship. To be honest, there has to be a Chinese response at some point.
It could be that China's too busy dealing with an even more aggressive adversary, the Philippines.
This country will not lose 1 inch.
When Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. took power in 2022, he reversed the Philippines strategy.
It's imperialist from China, though, to be fair, let's be honest. It's like saying it's worse in the US, far from it, but to be fair, the China Sea stuff is imperialist. The way I analyze this is exactly the same as the way I analyze the One Belt, One Road initiative. Okay? You cannot look at Chinese actions in the South China Sea without comparing it to historic examples to understand why they're doing this. And it's all a matter of where China goes from here. Okay? If they can't put together a joint security agreement in the region, or even if they do, they still end up violating it and don't allow any of these other nations in the area to take advantage of their own natural resources in their own coastlines, then that's entirely different. Then you're right. Okay? So far, China has not done that. Okay? This is true. But I look at the comparison between the IMF and the World Bank in terms of the way that economic imperialism still continues on the Western side for Western superpowers that dominate the global South. And then I compare that to the One Belt, One Road initiative. One Belt, One Road initiative and Chinese debts are quite similar in theory to the exact same way that these loans have been offered by the West. The difference, however, are the conditions of those loans. They are far better. No austerity implementation, and the goals for those loans are different as well. But I always maintain the position when talking about One Belt One Road I always explain to you that there might be a time and place where China actually does come to collect. Okay. No, it's Belt and Road. Sorry, I keep saying One Belt One Road. Belt and Road Initiative. Whatever. If the Chinese government decided to collect on those debts in a similar fashion, then I would have a similar perspective to the way that the World Bank and the IMF operates. And the same goes for this. Okay. The same goes for its actions in the South China Sea. Them refusing, like the Chinese government's refusal to allow Vietnam or the Philippines or any of these countries to take advantage of their own natural resources is completely unacceptable. Okay? It is. It's not acceptable. But I do suspect that the conditions of a joint security partnership in this area, if the Philippines also agree, even though they're virtually not a sovereign state in this regard, okay? But if there was a cooperative agreement and that Chinese trade routes were protected, I don't believe that they would enforce extra military action or engage in acts of aggression in violation of the same security cooperation that they've put forth. Okay? Wouldn't it make more sense for China to enter into alliances with the countries around it in order to benefit economically? Wait, they already have. That's what they're already doing this, which is why I'm saying that it's a little different.
Underlying all this stuff about the need of nuclear power is the idea that China has either threatened us or will threaten us. A distortion, and it's untrue. China does not threaten the United States. Nobody can threaten the United States. It's got 10,000 kilometres of sea between the Chinese coast and California. It's got the Atlantic Ocean on the other side. It has a massive country with in space, in land mass and friends.
Yeah. China has been pushing for joint security conferences for the nations in the area for decades now, but the U.S. keeps tanking them via the Philippines.
Friends in Canada on the north and Mexico on the south, and the greatest armaments in all history. China has committed, in the eyes of the United States, the great sin of internationalism. And what is that sin? To develop an economy as big as the United States. That's the sin. They've got as big as the US. The Americans will never condone or accept a state as large as them, you know, and that's what China presents. China's mere presence. I mean, they would have preferred they remain in poverty, 20% of humanity forever. But the fact that China is now, you know, an industrial economy larger than the United States, larger, according to the IMF, 20% larger, they say, hang on, this is not in the playbook. This is not in the playbook. You know, what an affront. This is about the maintenance of US strategic hegemony in Asia. Now, this is a country which has no.
Considering that China stopped aiding the MPA of CPP in the Philippines, you would have thought that at some point within the last 14 years, the Filipino government would pursue some form of normalization considering China's influence on regional trade. Is there a reason it hasn't? Is the only answer that it's a U.S. vassal? I think it's a major China L. They should fucking fund the Maoists. They should fund a Maoist revolution in the Philippines. It's just right there. It's just right there in the making.
Land in the metropolitan zone of Asia. There's no US in Asia. It's 10,000 kilometres across the Pacific to the coast of California. So they are not a metropolitan Asian power, but they claim to be and wish to be the primary strategic power in Asia. So what are the Chinese supposed to say to that? Oh, that's okay. We've been here 4,000 years. We've developed, you know,
I mean, they funded a Maoist revolution in Cambodia and it sent the shit. Okay, fair.
We've been subjugated by every bugger known to man. We've developed a decent economy, a decent standard of living, you know, shelter, accommodation, education, you know. That's our sin, is it? That's our sin. And we've got to be superintended by your nation.
We're also difficult given Philippines' predisposition to feudalistic Catholicism, same as Indonesia with feudalistic Islam. I feel like Indonesia, there was another thing that fucking happened that we were responsible for as well, that kind of destroyed any sort of socialist mobilization in the country. But I don't know. Also, no, religion or religious roots are silly. Yeah, how did the Philippines get to Catholicism is a good question, but
Navy, by the US Navy. Could you just imagine if the Chinese Blue Water Navy decided to do their sightseeing 6 miles off the coast of California? Could you imagine the brouhaha that would go on?
I believe by entering our water and airspace over the recent years, China has inadvertently pushed Australia into the arms of the U.S., says Coconut Wiggy Oz. I love hearing stuff like this from Australians, which is so funny because, like, you're already a vassal state, big dog, and you should be excited about it, okay? Like, you are a vassal state for China, okay? Australia being pushed to the arms of the U.S. is a hilarious notion. So you're basically the Israel of Asia, Lamau. Shut up. Oh my God, I never thought about Australia like that. That's funny. God, imagine being so close to liberation like that. We have a major CIA base in Australia and we've already done a CIA coup in their country. Yeah. Well, no one can overcome the power of delicious treats, consumer goods. No, we are not. We are a lapdog for your shithole country. We'll see. I actually never thought about Australia. Being like Israel. But it's not. It's not like Israel. It's not. It's not. I feel like no, I don't agree. I don't want to agree. I visited Australia, okay? Taiwan is the Israel of Asia? No, okay, Mao. Listen, I don't think that Taiwan is like the Israel of Asia. It doesn't. No, and South Korea doesn't work. Japan doesn't work either. Australia is way closer because it's also a settler colonial state built on ethnically cleansing the indigenous population. The Israel of Asia is Pakistan, but motherfuckers aren't ready for that convo. My friend is Taiwanese, and because China supports Palestine, she hates Palestine, and I'm sad. Israel is a unique country, okay? That's why I said even Australia would not be Israel territory. South Africa is the only other country that is similar to Israel, I think. Apartheid South Africa. Isn't Israel the Israel of Asia? Okay, that's not the part of Asia that we're talking about. Continue.
His predecessor had mostly avoided talking about China's island building and activities in the South China Sea.
It's an actual quote from 1965 when he met Abu Jihad of the PLO in Beijing and said, Taiwan is the Israel of Asia, East Asia. No, I know. That's why I said, okay, Mao.
But Marcos ordered his navy to start publicizing them. It began releasing videos showing how the Chinese Coast Guard shadows its ships, cuts them off, and even blasts them with water cannons. By publicizing China's actions, the Philippines hopes to form a common front with its neighbors and get sympathy from abroad. It also wants Sabina Shoal is claimed by both countries, but neither has built any permanent structures. When the Philippines docked a ship there in April 2024, Chinese ships surrounded it, then rammed it over and over until it was forced to leave.
China's kind of faced with an interesting decision is like, well, do we lighten up so that we don't look so bad in the international media? Or do we try to punish them harder because now they're trying to make us look bad? Essentially, they've sided on the second option every time.
That's exactly what happened in June 2024, when the Philippines sent a boat to resupply its men on Second Thomas Shoal, and China refused to let them. No incident in the South China Sea had ever come down to knives and axes. And while actual combat was avoided, one Philippine sailor did lose a thumb when the boats collided. This standoff illustrates exactly why tensions are rising in the South China Sea. For the first time, one country, the Philippines...
Come on. As an American, when I look at like other countries, when I look at other countries engaging in like territorial battles, and they're like, and the American guy's like, see, they have an axe. How can I not laugh at that, man? Like, I cover straight up ethnic cleansing on a daily fucking basis. Like, where are the cruise missiles? Like, what the fuck's going on? What do you mean? It's a bunch of dudes with an axe yelling at the other group of dudes on the fucking dinghy. Like, what it just sounds, maybe I'm stupid. It's not because I'm a China simp, okay? But I truly find it hilarious that like Americans sit around and they're like, dude, have you seen this shit? They got axes and water cannons. I'm like, what do you think our fucking Navy does, man? You think our Navy, dude, if our Navy was actually going up to other boats with axes and water cannons, America would be the greatest peacekeeping force on the planet, okay? People would be like, look at how far America has come. Look at how unimaginably peaceful America has become. They dropped the fucking sidewinders for knives and axes. Our Navy is so violent that we actually fucking kill ourselves, okay? We got nobody else. Sometimes when we got nobody else to shoot at, we shoot at ourselves. We drop our own fucking planes, dude. School shooters in the U.S. are better armed than these Chinese guys? Yeah, that's what I mean. Yes, U.S. Super Hornet shot down over Red Sea in friendly fire incident. Aviator safe. It's just, I don't know. I find it ridiculous where we're like, our enemies are doing unimaginable war crimes. And then like you look at what we're doing. I look at what we're doing and then I look at like our big bad enemies and what they're doing. I'm like, really? Are you fucking serious? This is why it's hard for me to have the same level of smoke for China as I do for Russia, okay? Like Russia actually does a metric ton of violent shit. Very America style, okay? Completely unacceptable. Completely ridiculous. Death and destruction galore. Also self-defeating. But like, it's crazy to consider the restraint that other countries have in terms of like their own back and forth. And then we just look at that and we say, this is the most violent thing we've ever seen. Meanwhile, you got fucking missile silos pointed at China from Japan. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? What are you saying? Dudes are fucking rolling over each other's heads with like sticks and stones of the fucking border dispute that they have with India and water cannons.
Is fighting back against China, and China's proving willing to escalate in order to stop them. After the fight, the Philippines could resupply its soldiers, but it couldn't repair the grounded ship. This deal will help diffuse tensions in the short term, but eventually, this ship's gonna have to be repaired, and that could lead to a more contentious standoff in the future. The problem is this is just one of several areas that the Philippines and China are contesting. And that's worrisome because their conflict could involve more than just them.
The Republic of the Philippines, once an American possession, represents...
Yeah, it's China guns. They just don't want to escalate the situation with heavier weapons like the trigger-happy West. Like, yeah, you think they don't have fucking rail guns on their ships? They do.
Cito's cornerstone
like
on the east in Asia.
Since the Cold War, the United States has pledged to help the Philippines if it's attacked, and that includes...
We should unironically be happy that other countries don't operate in the same way that the United States of America does, because we know what happens when they do, okay? Russia is a great example of what happens when a foreign country outside of the periphery, outside of the fucking sphere of Western influence, decides to do America shit. Like, that's it. Railgun for a small fish boat? Brother, what the fuck do you think Americans do? What do you think the American Navy does to pirate ships? What do you think the pirate ships look like? What do you think the American Navy does to the whatever remainder of like the Ansar Allah naval force or the Ansar Allah fucking forces look like? I don't know. I'm not American. Yeah. America certainly is not above using insane weapons, even against a civilian population.
Attacks on, quote, public vessels. Meaning that any of these clashes could qualify as something the U.S. is obliged to respond to. Remember the soldier who lost his thumb?
If that was his arm instead, maybe he bleeds out and dies, and then you have a U.S. treaty ally who's just had a soldier die in a conflict with China in the South China Sea.
That's why many are worried about these incidents between China and the Philippines. They could easily lead to a conflict.
Dude, think about the like, you can't be you're an American analyst, dude. Like, as an American analyst, saying this is fucking wild. Like, yeah, I wonder who would be the escalating factor here if such a thing occurred, okay? Who would be the escalating party here? Who is salivating at the prospect of such a thing happening? I mean, countries that have been in conflict with one another or have like delicate security agreements that sometimes violate like the back and forth communications, like Russia and Turkey, end up fucking dealing with it. You know what I mean? Without actually going to war. But yes, if any Chinese naval vassal turned around and like actually killed anyone that is under American protection, yes, 100% America would use that as an opportunity to do untold amounts of violence and ridiculous escalation in this region. They would manufacture consent for it. For all of these years, they have been manufacturing consent for it. Many Americans are geared up. I mean, the entirety of the Philippines is just like an unsinkable American Navy base that they reopened recently, a couple years ago. Thank God for Joe Brandon. Why don't they attack Israel for killing Egyptian border forces then? Dude, what are you talking about? Israel kills American citizens. Israel has killed American citizens. Israel assassinated an American citizen in the West Bank. Okay? We did all but like apologize to Israel for, having an American citizen in the vicinity of Israeli bullets, basically. I mean, yeah, Israel's killed American soldiers. The Israeli occupying force bombed UN observers from Ireland. This is not, but you're not considering all the hypotheticals. Come on, bro. Exactly. Israel ran a woman over by the name of Rachel Corrie from Washington. They ran her over with a bulldozer because she was bulldozing a Palestinian's home. Israel killed aid workers from not just the United States of America, but numerous other countries. World Central Kitchen aid workers. None of that matters, okay? That's why it's so fucking ridiculous when we talk about like, oh, what if in the entanglement with the Chinese Coast Guard and the Filipino Coast Guard, like the dude's arm got cut off instead of his thumb and he fucking died. What would happen then? All hell would break loose. And it's like, yeah, I wonder why. I wonder why our foreign adversaries doing even having a fucking accident in an otherwise like incomparable type of dispute in comparison to what the United States of America is doing all around the fucking world. Like, I wonder why that would turn into like genuine global crisis. Yeah, because America is salivating at the prospect of escalating conflict in that side. They do not like that China has developed economic trade partnerships with all of these countries. They do not like that China is developing its own backyard. That's the number one issue here. They don't like that China is dominating the globe in terms of trade as well.
Between China and the U.S. Afterwards, the U.S. reiterated its support for the Philippines, and the Philippines clarified that it would not invoke the treaty.
But this situation still leaves me with one big question. China's choosing to respond aggressively to the Philippines, but not any of the other countries. Vietnam is literally building islands, and China isn't saying anything, but it's cracking down in response to any move the Philippines makes.
Yeah, I wonder why. I wonder why the Philippines is the only country. I wonder why the Philippines is the only country that China is more aggressively responding to. Why China is not aggressively responding to other development projects in the region. What could be the difference? I don't know.
Country backed by us.
I mean, they know what it is. That's why they literally said, if the Filipino, what if in the hypothetical, the Filipino Coast Guard's fucking but like arm cut off and he died of like blood loss, then all hell would break loose because America would come in and fuck their shit up. Okay? That's it.
Superpower. I'm wondering if China is using these incidents with the Philippines to test the U.S.'s relationship with them. In addition to the South China Sea, it wants to take over Taiwan and ultimately have influence over all of East Asia. But it's currently constrained.
Genuinely don't know what the reason is? No, they already said it. It's because America is using the Philippines and Taiwan to a certain degree as well to actively say like, fuck you.
By the U.S. and its allies in the region. By acting aggressively against the Philippines, China may be trying to demonstrate to the Philippines that the U.S. doesn't necessarily have its back.
There's a logic for China that if they can demonstrate that the U.S. alliance does not help the Philippines and that the only...
What? You love shitting on the U.S. for pushing escalation like this, but refuse to acknowledge similar, if not stronger, motives coming from China, on top of the humanitarian atrocities that China is a part of day in, day out. U.S. is the bad guy during peacetime, but China is silently worse in almost every way. I don't know what you're talking about. Like I just spent the last hour describing to you how ridiculous it is to get extra mad at this shit, okay? Which seemingly could be dealt with through a My bad, I just got here. Yeah, we've deported a single mom to Gitmo for a traffic violation. we deported people back to Guatemala after they lived here in the United States of America for like 15 fucking years for trespassing. Those are the severe crimes of the rugged criminals that we are violently removing from our ranks. And that is before we get to American foreign policy. But in terms of like, you know, I mean, you seemingly have a point, so I would love to hear it. I don't know. Maybe I'll agree with you. Yeah, we're deporting Venezuelans to Mexico and separating them from their children. Like I said, as it is currently, hyper-focusing on the actions of a foreign adversary like this, in my opinion, is to simply say like, no, there's other bad powers out there too. They're evil and scary. Okay? I would definitely say that Russian actions are closer to American actions in general. Russian actions in Ukraine are atrocities. They're completely unacceptable. But like acting as though this kind of like South China Sea back and forth with like the Chinese Coast Guard and water cannons that they're using on the fucking Filipino boats is like in any way, shape, or form remotely similar to anything America's doing is completely ridiculous, especially when all of this could literally be solved. All of this could literally be solved without American interference. Okay, if it was devoid of any sort of U.S. interference, they would absolutely just be like, all right, yeah, it's fine. Please help us develop. That seems great, which they are already doing. Now, after all of that, if China's like, yeah, this is all ours now, you can't even use your own natural resources, then that's an entirely different equation. Then I agree with you. Okay? But I'm not going to sit here and fucking be mad at like hypotheticals about what China might do down the line. Okay? While we're doing infinitely worse shit already.
The way to do that is to instead talk to China, make a deal, and kind of give up. They're hoping that this...
But that is what they've been doing in the Philippines? No, I'm saying I'm not downplaying Chinese actions in the region. I'm asking you simply, why do you think it's only the Philippines that they have these kinds of issues with? Okay? It's because Americans use the Philippines as their strategic partner in the area. That's it. Don't they also have problems with Vietnam? No, not in recent years, as far as I understand. Initially, yes. But not to the same degree any longer. Anyway.
This narrative can kind of prying the Philippines away from the U.S. But basically, so far, what we've seen is the opposite. The Philippine public, there's a large, overwhelming support for the U.S., and there's a lot of distrust in China.
Help me out, I'm dumb. Can't you use the same logic for the Cuban Missile Crisis? Yeah, I wonder how the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. I mean, I'm a Turkish guy. I'm going to give you one big clue, okay? As a Turkish man, how could my background be, to a certain degree, relevant to the Cuban Missile Crisis? Think. How did that happen? The USSR was just trying to get some missiles, King? Is that what you think happened out of nowhere? Yeah. If America was honest about how they explain American history, they would call it the Turkish missile crisis, okay?
Ultimately, what makes this region so dangerous isn't just the competition on the surface playing out between these 6 countries, but the other one between 2 superpowers below the surface.
Thanks so much for watching this episode. We're Search Party. We cover sports and geopolitics.
All I'm saying is, like, I think if there is a peaceful method to end all of these moments of instability, we should take it. And I don't think that that is a unreasonable position, right? If there is a way to do cooperation in the region for China, I think they should be able to do that. Do you agree? That's what I believe. But there is a third party that does not consent to these sorts of actions and will regularly say it's because of other shit.